Good morning, Cara. We're back to talk about the differences between large churches and small churches. And the question that we're thinking about today is, how do you get invited to participate in a large church? How does that happen?
So in a large church, we have so many things going on that oftentimes there isn't a personal invitation, as I imagine you'll talk about in a minute, that happens in small churches, right? Most of the time, our invitations are given through newsletters, maybe some personal letters for classes like membership class or an upcoming Lenten study, but most of the time it's through our newsletters, through the circuit rider, because there are so many invitations and opportunities for one to participate in, um, that often those aren't personal invitations. How about in a small church?
I think the main difference is that a small church, if you start coming regularly, it's easy for me to know that there's a new person there. And at a small church, then it's usually the pastor that engages a new person and finds out more about them, what their interests are, and then tries to think, what's a good connection for this person in the church? How do I invite them into something where they could feel connected? So there's still those invitations that might be announced on Sunday morning. If you'd like to come to something or you'd like to engage in a class,
Mm-hmm.
those still happen. But because it's just so easy to spot people that are new, then the invitations are usually they come from the pastor about how you might want to get involved further.
Yeah, and at Puyallup, that piece about figuring out what your passions are actually takes place in our spiritual gifts class, right? Like, so it's you'd be invited to attend that class, and you would figure out what your gifts were, and then how would you then use those gifts in the church as a whole. But again, that invitation is usually put out through our newsletters and not necessarily from me personally.
Mm-hmm. So then, at a church the size of Puyallup, how do people feel connected to the faith community? How does that work?
Well, it's often very interesting in a large church because the way you feel connected or feel part of the faith community is through some sort of small group. Now, it might be a formalized small group like a committee. It might be um, a group like the quilters or the choir or the bell choir. But it also could be like an informal group, like we have a group of widows that meet together fairly regularly. We have some informal prayer groups that happen. But it's really like your small network of friends that you know. In a large church, you can't know everybody. There's just no way you can know 200 people. So it's really important that you get connected to a small group of people, either through participating in a small group somehow or creating some friend groups. And that's how you feel like you're part of something bigger. How
Mm-hmm.
about in a small church?
I think it's both. People still have their small groups and the places where they feel most connected. So if you were part of the quilting ministry, you would feel
Mhm.
connected through those people. But also because the congregation is small, there'd be a sense on Sunday morning that you knew who the people
Mhm.
were that were there. And if someone was missing, you might notice that you didn't see the person sitting in the
Mhm.
pew next to you that you normally would, or across the pew.
Mhm.
So the size makes a difference in the feeling of connection, that if your
Mhm.
church is about, 50 to 60 people, you will have a sense of feeling connected to them. Even though you may not know everybody's names that are
Mhm.
there, you probably know most of them. And
Yeah.
even still, even in a church that size, there's still the different groups that people feel even more tied into, and the
Mhm.
people they might call for help if they
Yeah.
needed something from the church. They might reach out to the group that they knew well first.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, our question for you listeners today is, can you think of a small group that you are a part of? that keeps you feeling connected to Puyallup United Methodist Church?